The night was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that seemed almost too heavy, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Streetlights flickered along the empty sidewalks, casting long shadows that danced like silent ghosts. A gentle wind rustled the leaves, whispering secrets only the night could understand. Among this stillness, a woman walked briskly, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement, echoing in the emptiness. Her name was Maya, a black woman in her late 20s, with sharp eyes and a confident air, though tonight, even her poise seemed tempered with caution. She clutched her purse tightly, feeling the familiar weight of her bag against her side, and tried to shake off the uneasy feeling crawling up her spine. Maya had been heading home from a late shift at a downtown office. It had been a long day filled with endless meetings and phone calls that seemed to demand more than anyone could give. The city had settled into its nightly rhythm, neon signs flickering in windows and distant car horns blaring occasionally. Maya had always been comfortable walking alone at night, but tonight, something felt different. It was a premonition she couldn't ignore, a whisper of danger that tugged at her instincts. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone following her. The streets were empty, but the sense of being watched remained. Her pulse quickened. As she approached a quiet intersection, the sharp wail of sirens shattered the night. Red and blue lights splashed across the buildings, creating a chaotic dance of color that made her squint. A police car screeched to a halt beside her, tires squealing against the asphalt. Two officers jumped out, their faces stern, voices sharp. "Hands where we can see them," one shouted, and in that instant, Maya's heart nearly stopped. Her mind raced as she raised her hands slowly, feeling the weight of every second stretch unbearably long. The officers moved closer, their expressions unreadable, their eyes scanning her as if she were a threat she had no clue about. Maya's mind worked frantically. She wasn't sure why they had stopped her. She wasn't doing anything wrong. And yet, the fear clawed at her chest. It wasn't just the fear of being confronted by police, it was the fear of what could happen if things went wrong. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she tried to calm herself, recalling everything she had learned about staying composed in tense situations. She glanced at their badges, their uniforms, the way their hands hovered near their holsters. She knew she had to remain calm. Any sudden movement could escalate the situation. But the instinctive tension in her body was impossible to ignore. Her eyes darted around, seeking a place to run, a way out, any sign that this confrontation could be avoided. The city that had always felt like home now seemed alien, the familiar streets twisting into a labyrinth of uncertainty. The wind picked up, tugging at her coat, and for a moment, she felt like a character trapped in a story she hadn't written. One officer's voice broke through her thoughts. "Step aside," he commanded, his tone sharp but not yet angry. Maya obeyed, moving carefully to the side, her hands still raised. She noticed the other officers scanning the street behind her, their gaze tense and calculating. Something about their movement felt off. They weren't just doing a routine stop. There was suspicion in their eyes, an intensity that sent another shiver down her spine. Her mind flashed through worst-case scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. She reminded herself to breathe, to stay in control, to use her mind before panic took over. Maya's thoughts drifted to her past, to the training she had endured and the experiences that had shaped her. She had always known how to handle herself, how to navigate dangerous situations, but this was different. The unpredictability of human behavior, the way fear, authority, and misunderstanding could collide, was something no training could fully prepare her for. She felt a surge of both fear and determination. She would not let panic dictate her actions. She would not let this night define her. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin slightly, and met the officer's gaze with as much calm as she could muster. "Ma'am, step away from your bag," one officer said, his tone sharper now. Maya's heart jumped. Her bag contained more than personal items. It carried a part of her life that was private, secret, and powerful. Her fingers twitched slightly, tempted to make a move, but she held back, knowing the wrong action could change everything in an instant. She weighed her options carefully, calculating the risk and timing. Every second felt stretched, every heartbeat loud in her ears. The officers were tense, exchanging glances that Maya couldn't fully interpret. They were trained, professional, but the uncertainty in their eyes was undeniable. They didn't know who she was, what she was capable of, or the life she led beyond the surface. Maya felt a mix of fear and empowerment. She could see the edge of control slipping, the fragile barrier between caution and chaos. And yet, she also knew that she held something that could shift the balance entirely. Her mind raced with scenarios. She could comply, hand over identification, and hope for the best. Or she could reveal the truth, the secret she carried, and force them to reconsider everything they thought they knew. The choice weighed heavily, a moment of decision that could change the course of the night entirely. The city around them faded into the background, the sirens, the flickering lights, and the distant sounds all blending into a tense silence. All that mattered was the space between her and the officers, the invisible line drawn by fear and authority. Maya's hand hovered near her bag, her fingers brushing against the edges of what she carried. Time seemed to slow, each heartbeat a drum of suspense. The officers' voices grew louder, more commanding, but she felt a strange calm settle over her. This was a moment she had anticipated in her own way, a test of courage and clarity under pressure. She inhaled deeply, steadying her breath, focusing her mind on the choices ahead. The night had become a stage, the city a silent witness to what was about to unfold. Then, in a heartbeat, she moved. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her bag and pulled out an item that would change everything. It wasn't a weapon, and it wasn't a threat. It was a badge, an emblem of authority far beyond what the officers had imagined. The glint of metal caught the flashing lights, reflecting red and blue in a dazzling display. Maya held it firmly, her expression calm, almost serene. The officers froze, their shouts caught in their throats. Their eyes widened as the realization hit. What they had assumed, what they had feared, was suddenly confronted by a truth they hadn't expected. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The streetlights flickered, the wind rustled, and the distant hum of the city became a faint echo. Maya's heart pounded, but her face betrayed nothing. The officers stared, unsure how to proceed, caught between protocol and disbelief. In that instant, the balance of power shifted. Fear, authority, and control collided in a single suspended moment, and the night held its breath once again. Maya's mind remained sharp, her instincts honed, yet she allowed herself a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had turned the tables, asserted her presence, and reminded everyone involved that appearances could be deceiving. The tension hung thick in the air, a living thing that pulsed with anticipation. The officer's next move would decide the course of the encounter, and Maya knew that every second counted. She held her badge with quiet confidence, aware of its power, aware of the truth it represented. The street remained silent, the city seemingly holding its breath with her. The officers were still, caught in the gravity of the revelation. Maya felt a surge of relief mixed with a lingering adrenaline rush. She knew the night was far from over, but in this moment, she had taken control. The narrative had shifted, and the suspense remained, compelling and electrifying. The city's quiet night had become a theater of tension, fear, and revelation, and Maya stood at its center, poised, strong, and unforgettable. The officers blinked, their expressions frozen between disbelief and confusion. Maya held her badge steadily, the metal cool and solid in her hand. The flashing red and blue lights bounced off the pavement, highlighting the sharp lines of her face, the calm determination in her eyes. One officer swallowed hard, stepping back slightly, as if the weight of her presence pressed on him. He glanced at his partner, who was equally stunned, before looking back at Maya. The air was thick with tension, every sound amplified, the hum of a distant car, the rustle of leaves, even the faint buzz of the streetlights above. Maya's heartbeat was steady now, her fear replaced by focus. She had been trained for moments like this, for situations where every second mattered. Her mind ran through countless scenarios, calculating the safest way forward, not just for herself but for everyone involved. She knew that one wrong move could escalate things quickly, and yet, she also knew the truth she held was undeniable. The badge in her hand wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a symbol of authority, a silent command that could change everything. "Step aside and put your hands down," one officer finally said, his voice still tight but controlled. Maya obeyed, her movements slow and deliberate. She placed her bag at her side, making sure her body language spoke of calm and compliance. Yet, her eyes never left the officers, reading them like open books. There was fear in their movements, a hesitation that betrayed their training. For a fleeting moment, Maya wondered how many people had walked into situations like this without the truth on their side, and how differently things would have ended for them. The taller officer took a deep breath, his gaze lingering on the badge. "Ma'am, we didn't know," he said, his voice betraying uncertainty. Maya's lips pressed together, and she shook her head ever so slightly. "Now you do," she replied calmly, her voice steady, confident, and tinged with the authority that came from years of experience. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. The officers exchanged another glance, their hands slowly lowering, but their eyes never left her. They were trained to assess threats, to make split-second decisions, yet this was beyond anything they had encountered. For Maya, the moment was both tense and surreal. She had faced danger countless times before, but never in the open like this, in a city street, under flashing lights, with strangers' fear mingling with her own. The adrenaline surged through her, sharp and electric, but she focused on breathing, on remaining composed. She knew that keeping control of her emotions was just as important as the badge in her hand. She could feel the officer's uncertainty growing, the invisible barrier between authority and respect shifting ever so slightly. "You're CIA?" the shorter officer asked finally, his voice almost a whisper. Maya nodded, her expression calm but firm. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. For a moment, the street seemed to hold its breath with her. The officers were silent, the tension palpable, as they processed what they had just learned. Maya's mind, meanwhile, drifted briefly to the times she had relied on secrecy, the life she had led balancing ordinary routines with extraordinary responsibility. No one outside her circle had ever known, and now, in a split second, her hidden life had collided with reality. The taller officer rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous gesture that revealed his inner conflict. We weren't expecting this," he admitted, his tone hesitant. Maya's eyes softened slightly. She could sense their confusion, their struggle to reconcile what they saw with the assumptions they had made. It was a human moment, a crack in the rigid wall of authority that surrounded them. She decided to give them a choice, a way to recover their composure without escalating the situation further. "Look," she said gently, "you don't have to understand everything right now. Just know that this badge means something important. I'm not a threat to you, and you're not a threat to me, if we handle this carefully." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. She had spoken to people in far more dangerous situations, yet here, her calm tone seemed almost as powerful as any weapon. The officers nodded slowly, though their tension remained, like coiled springs waiting to be released. Maya took a step back, signaling that she wasn't looking for confrontation, that she respected their authority while asserting her own. She could feel their eyes on her, scanning every movement, every subtle gesture. It was a delicate dance, a balance of trust and caution, and Maya had learned it well. The street around them remained silent, the usual night noises muted by the gravity of the moment. Every detail mattered, the flicker of a streetlight, the distant hum of a car, the gentle sway of a nearby tree, all seemed to emphasize the surreal tension of the encounter. As they stood there, Maya's thoughts drifted briefly to her training. She had learned to read people, to anticipate reactions, to manage both fear and authority. Every movement she made was calculated, deliberate, and yet fluid, like water finding its path. She realized that most people would have panicked, reacted impulsively, or even made mistakes that could cost them dearly. But Maya wasn't most people. She had lived a life of preparation, of readiness, and now, that life was revealing itself in the quiet street under the flashing lights. Can we see some identification?" the shorter officer asked, his voice still trembling slightly. Maya reached into her bag again, producing the official CIA credentials. The metal glinted under the streetlights as she held it out calmly. The officers leaned forward, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. Every instinct they had, every training exercise they had ever undergone, seemed to falter in the face of the unexpected truth. Maya's calm demeanor, her steady gaze, and the weight of the credentials created a surreal pause in the night. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then, slowly, one officer spoke. We should have handled this differently." Maya's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. It wasn't triumph, it was understanding. She knew fear and assumptions had driven this encounter, and she didn't hold it against them. "It's okay," she replied softly, her voice steady. "But now you know. Be careful with assumptions next time. You never know who you're dealing with." The officers nodded, still processing, still unsure of how to react. Maya could feel the tension gradually easing, like a tightrope losing some of its tautness. She stepped back further, placing a hand on her bag to signal she was finished with the demonstration. The adrenaline in her body began to ebb, replaced by a steady calm. She knew the night wasn't over, that there would be questions, there would be explanations, and there would be memories of this encounter that would linger long after the streetlights went out. And yet, in that moment, the balance of power had shifted. Maya had asserted herself without aggression, revealed a secret without fear, and reminded everyone present that courage, composure, and truth could alter the course of events in ways that no one expected. The officers, though still cautious, had been forced to acknowledge a reality beyond their training, beyond their assumptions, and beyond the ordinary night around them. As Maya finally turned to continue her walk, the city seemed different. The streetlights flickered as if acknowledging her passage, the wind carried a whisper of the night's tension, and the empty sidewalks seemed to stretch endlessly, holding the echo of the encounter. She knew that this night would be remembered, not just for the officers, but for herself. The city, in all its noise and chaos, had given her a moment of revelation, a moment of control, and a reminder of the hidden layers that exist beneath the surface of everyday life. Maya walked on, her steps measured, her mind alert, and her heart steady. She knew the next moments would require focus, for the city was unpredictable, and the night held its own secrets. But for now, she had faced fear, met authority, and emerged not just unharmed but empowered. The encounter had set the stage for what was to come, a deeper journey into her life, her secrets, and the extraordinary truth that lay behind the badge she carried so confidently. The street seemed to exhale as Maya continued walking, her steps measured, yet her mind was alive with calculations and memories. She could feel the officer's eyes on her back, hesitant and cautious, as if the world had shifted in the seconds following her revelation. For them, this encounter was a surprise beyond comprehension. For Maya, it was a moment that reminded her of a life she rarely showed to anyone, a life wrapped in secrets, danger, and precision. The badge in her hand was more than a symbol, it was a key to a world few could even imagine, and it carried a weight that was both exhilarating and burdensome. Maya's thoughts drifted to the beginning, to the path that had led her here. She had not always been a woman walking alone in the quiet streets of a city at night. Her life had been carefully crafted through years of discipline and extraordinary training. She remembered the first day she was recruited, the way the walls of the training center had seemed both confining and liberating. Every day had been a test of endurance, intelligence, and courage. She had learned to read people, predict actions, and navigate danger in ways that ordinary citizens could not fathom. Every moment of her life had been preparing her for encounters like tonight. As she turned a corner, the distant sound of sirens faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the city at night. The adrenaline from the encounter still coursed through her veins, yet she allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She had faced countless challenges before, situations that could have ended in disaster, but each time, she had emerged with her focus intact. The night, however, reminded her that the ordinary world often had no understanding of the extraordinary. People assumed, feared, and judged based on appearances alone. Tonight was a stark reminder of that truth. Maya's mind returned to the officers, to the way their expressions had shifted from authority to confusion and awe. It fascinated her how quickly perceptions could change when confronted with an unexpected reality. She had often used this understanding in her work, predicting reactions and navigating complex situations with precision. But tonight, the encounter carried an emotional resonance she had not anticipated. There was a quiet satisfaction, yes, but also a weight, a reminder of the solitude that came with living a life most could not comprehend. She thought of the missions, the cities she had visited undercover, the people she had met and lost along the way. Each experience had shaped her, taught her the importance of composure and observation. The life of a CIA operative was not glamorous, it was calculated, disciplined, and often lonely. But it had given her skills, instincts, and confidence that no ordinary path could provide. It was these skills that had allowed her to handle the street encounter with calm and control, turning a potentially dangerous situation into a demonstration of quiet authority. As she walked past the quiet cafes and closed storefronts, her mind replayed the moments of her training that had prepared her for tonight. She remembered the instructor's words, "Control your fear, control the situation. Observe, analyze, and act with purpose." Every principle had been drilled into her until it became second nature. And now, standing on this city street, she realized how seamlessly her secret life and her ordinary life could collide. One moment she was just Maya, a woman walking home. The next, she was a force that others had to recognize and respect, whether they understood it or not. Her thoughts turned to the consequences. If the encounter had been different, if the officers had reacted with panic, aggression, or misunderstanding, the outcome could have been dangerous. She reflected on countless times where the slightest miscalculation could have resulted in disaster. The street, the lights, and the silence around her felt heavier now, loaded with the invisible weight of what might have been. Yet she remained calm, confident in her abilities, and in the understanding that she had navigated the situation successfully. Maya's fingers brushed lightly against her bag, a subconscious gesture reminding her of the responsibility she carried. The badge had revealed a secret that most of the world would never see, and with that revelation came both power and vulnerability. She was aware that her life could never be entirely ordinary, that moments like this would occasionally pierce the thin veil of normalcy she maintained. It was a life lived on the edge, balanced between danger and discretion, and it demanded constant awareness. As she approached a quieter street lined with trees, her mind drifted further into memories of her early days in the agency. She had been tested in ways that seemed impossible, pushed to physical and mental limits she hadn't known existed. There had been moments of fear, moments of doubt, and moments when the only option was to trust her training and instincts completely. Those experiences had honed her ability to remain calm under pressure, to turn tension into strategy, and to recognize opportunities in moments of uncertainty. Tonight, all those lessons were in play. A gentle breeze swept through the street, rustling the leaves and carrying with it the faint scent of the city at night. Maya paused for a moment, letting herself absorb the quiet, reflecting on the duality of her existence. To the world, she was just another woman navigating life. But beneath the surface, she carried secrets, skills, and responsibilities that few could imagine. It was a delicate balance, one that required vigilance, intelligence, and courage. And tonight had been a reminder of how quickly the ordinary and extraordinary could intersect. Maya's steps quickened slightly as she neared her apartment building. The night had been tense, the encounter had been charged with fear and revelation, and yet there was a sense of resolution. She knew the officers had been forced to see the truth, to acknowledge a reality that existed beyond their assumptions. But she also knew that the city was full of surprises, and that caution was never optional. Her mind, trained to anticipate threats and opportunities alike, remained alert even as the adrenaline faded. She entered the building, the familiar scent of the lobby grounding her. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to relax, to feel the comfort of a place that was truly hers. Yet even here, she remained aware, alert to the possibilities that life could present. The night had tested her, reminded her of the fragile line between fear and control, and yet it had also reinforced the power of presence, preparation, and courage. Maya knew that the story of tonight was far from over. It was only the beginning of another chapter, another lesson in the life she had chosen, the life she had trained for, and the life that few would ever understand. She climbed the stairs slowly, the sound of her steps echoing faintly in the empty building. Each floor brought her closer to the sanctuary of her apartment, yet also closer to the quiet reflection of what had just transpired. Maya paused at her door, taking a deep breath, feeling both the weight and the relief of the night's events. The world outside remained unaware of the extraordinary encounter that had just occurred, but Maya carried it with her, a reminder of both her skills and the hidden layers of her life. Inside her apartment, the familiar walls and muted lighting offered a sense of normalcy, yet Maya knew the evening had shifted something. The revelation, the tension, the courage required, it was all part of the life she led in secret. She set her bag down carefully, ran her fingers over the badge briefly, and allowed herself a quiet acknowledgement of the skills, instincts, and discipline that had carried her through. Tonight had been a test, not of strength, but of calm, awareness, and courage, and Maya had passed it with clarity and precision. Sitting by her window, looking out at the city lights, Maya felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The night had revealed her secret, challenged her calm, and yet affirmed her abilities. She knew that life would continue to demand vigilance, that danger could appear in unexpected forms, and that her dual existence would always be a delicate balance. And yet, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had faced fear, authority, and uncertainty, and had emerged not only unharmed but empowered. The city streets seemed quieter now, but Maya could still feel the echo of the encounter following her. The adrenaline had faded slightly, replaced by the steady hum of awareness that never left her. She knew the officers were still there, processing what had just happened. Even from a distance, she could sense their hesitation, the uncertainty in their movements, and the silent acknowledgement that something extraordinary had occurred. It was a reminder that actions, even in a brief moment, could ripple far beyond what anyone expected. Meanwhile, the officers were huddled together near their car, speaking in hushed tones. Their voices were low, filled with disbelief, confusion, and a cautious respect. They replayed the moment over and over in their minds, the badge, the calm demeanor, the quiet authority that had left them stunned. Neither officer had encountered anything like this before. Their training, experience, and instincts had been challenged in a way that demanded reconsideration of everything they thought they knew. One of them rubbed his face, trying to process the truth without admitting to the shock it caused him. One officer whispered, almost to himself, his words trembling. The other nodded slowly, still staring at where she had disappeared around the corner. The reality of the situation weighed heavily on them. They had stopped her for a routine check, assuming authority and control, yet in seconds, the assumptions had crumbled. It was a humbling realization, one that left them unsure of their next move. The quiet streets seemed to amplify the tension, every distant sound carrying the weight of the encounter. Back on her path home, Maya's mind wandered to the officers' reactions. She understood the fear, the respect, and the uncertainty they now felt. It was a strange feeling, knowing that in a brief moment, she had revealed just enough to shift the balance, yet kept enough hidden to maintain control. She was aware that most people would never comprehend this duality, the mixture of power, caution, and restraint. Her life was a continuous balancing act, and tonight had been a vivid reminder of why discipline and awareness were essential. As she walked, Maya considered what could have happened if she hadn't acted with caution. A misstep, a hurried movement, or a lapse in composure could have turned the night into chaos. She had seen it before, in missions where seconds meant the difference between success and disaster. The memory of those moments gave her a sense of calm determination. She had survived because she had prepared, because she had trained, and because she trusted her instincts. Tonight had been a small, yet potent, reminder of the power of preparedness. The officers eventually decided to leave the scene, but not before exchanging a final glance, one filled with a mixture of awe and wariness. They drove slowly down the street, their minds still processing the encounter. Behind the wheel, they kept glancing into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her return or to realize they had missed something critical. Each moment they drove felt tense, like the aftershock of a storm. Maya, invisible to them now, had already melted into the night, but the impression she left behind lingered like a shadow, impossible to ignore. Maya reached her apartment building, the familiar structure rising like a safe haven amid the city's unpredictable night. Her hand lingered briefly on the doorknob, a small, human gesture of grounding herself after the extraordinary moment she had lived through. Inside, she could finally allow herself a deep breath, but even then, she remained alert. Her instincts, honed over years of training, would not let her fully relax. Danger, after all, could come at any time, in any form. And tonight had reminded her that even ordinary places held unexpected challenges. Once inside her apartment, Maya set her bag down carefully, her fingers brushing against the badge one more time. It gleamed under the soft light, a reminder of the dual life she carried. She reflected on the brief but intense encounter, understanding that moments like these were inevitable in her line of life. While most people experienced ordinary nights, she navigated a world where perception, control, and instinct intersected in ways few could imagine. Every decision mattered, every gesture carried significance, and every second had the potential to shift outcomes dramatically. From her window, she looked out at the city streets she had just traversed. The red and blue lights of the police car were gone, leaving only the distant hum of the city and the occasional sound of tires against asphalt. Yet the memory of the encounter remained vivid, imprinted in her mind with clarity. She could imagine the officers' thoughts, their silent analysis of what had happened, and she felt a quiet satisfaction. Not in arrogance, but in the acknowledgement that she had maintained control, turned a dangerous situation into a lesson, and asserted her presence without aggression. Her thoughts drifted to the consequences that might follow. Would the officers speak of this? Would anyone believe them if they did? Maya knew the truth of her life was hers alone to carry. She had long accepted that secrecy was a necessary part of her existence. Sharing too much could compromise not only her safety but the safety of those around her. Yet, tonight's encounter had been a rare intersection where secrecy met revelation, a delicate balance between ordinary life and the extraordinary skills she possessed. Maya's eyes lingered on the city below, reflecting the glow of streetlights and the muted bustle of late-night traffic. The night held a quiet tension, a reminder that even ordinary routines could harbor surprises. Her life was built on navigating these moments, blending courage, intellect, and calmness into each decision she made. And though she felt relief at having safely concluded the encounter, she also understood that the night had opened a window into the complexities of her existence, a world where ordinary perceptions clashed with hidden realities, and where courage and secrecy intertwined. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Maya allowed herself a brief pause, reflecting on the intensity of the evening. The badge on the table gleamed, a silent reminder of authority, responsibility, and the hidden world she inhabited. She felt the mix of adrenaline and calm that came with living on the edge, a sensation both exhausting and invigorating. It was the duality of her life, moments of ordinary vulnerability interlaced with extraordinary capability, that defined her, and tonight had showcased it in a way that was both humbling and empowering. Outside, the city continued its nightly rhythm, unaware of the extraordinary encounter that had taken place just blocks away. Maya leaned against her window frame, watching the lights and shadows play across the streets. In the distance, she could imagine the officers still processing the events, replaying the moment in their minds, and slowly integrating the revelation into their understanding of the world. For Maya, it was a quiet victory, a validation of her discipline, composure, and the life she had chosen, a life that demanded vigilance, resilience, and courage, often in ways that no one else could perceive or understand. Maya finally turned away from the window, her mind calm but alert. The night had tested her, reminded her of the fine line between ordinary life and extraordinary skill, and reinforced the importance of control, awareness, and courage. She knew that tomorrow would bring routine, distractions, and obligations, but tonight had been different. Tonight had been a demonstration of the power of composure and the weight of secrets carried with grace. And as she prepared to rest, she understood that the city held infinite possibilities for danger, discovery, and revelation, and that she was ready for whatever came next. Maya sat quietly in her apartment, the city lights casting soft shadows across the walls. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel the calm that followed the storm. But even in the quiet, memories of her past life stirred, vivid and insistent. She had not always been just Maya, walking alone through city streets. She had once been someone trained to navigate danger, to face situations most people could never imagine, and to act when every second counted. Her mind drifted back to her first days in the agency. She had been young, eager, and full of determination, yet utterly unprepared for the challenges that lay ahead. The training was grueling, designed to break individuals down and rebuild them into operatives capable of surviving any situation. Long hours, physical exhaustion, mental tests, and endless drills had become her life. She remembered the instructor's words ringing in her ears: observe first. Act second. Every detail matters. Trust your instincts, and trust your training. Those words had shaped her, taught her to control fear and remain calm in chaos. The missions that followed had taken her to cities across the globe. Each assignment had been different, yet each demanded precision, courage, and composure. She had infiltrated dangerous organizations, gathered intelligence, and faced situations where one mistake could mean disaster. There had been times when she had felt fear like a physical weight pressing on her chest, moments when instinct alone had guided her through life-threatening challenges. And yet, in every instance, she had survived, because she had learned to trust herself, to remain calm, and to act decisively. Maya's thoughts returned to the streets of her city tonight. The officers had seen only a glimpse of her life, a brief flash of the reality hidden beneath ordinary appearances. They did not know about the countless nights spent in training, the missions completed without recognition, the sacrifices made for a greater purpose. Yet the skills they had witnessed, the calm, the awareness, the quiet authority, were the direct result of years spent in preparation. In that moment, she had been both ordinary and extraordinary, a balance that few could comprehend. She remembered one mission in particular, a night that had tested her in ways she had never imagined. The target was heavily guarded, the city unfamiliar, and the stakes impossibly high. Every step required calculation, every glance demanded vigilance. One wrong move, and the mission, and her life, could have been lost. Yet she had moved with precision, anticipation, and confidence, navigating the danger with the skills she had honed over years. That night had taught her a lesson she carried always: control your fear, understand the situation, and act decisively. Maya's fingers brushed lightly against the badge she kept nearby, the symbol of authority that had shaped the encounter with the officers tonight. It was a reminder not only of her training but of the life she had built through discipline, courage, and perseverance. She thought of the countless sacrifices she had made, moments she could never share, friendships she could not fully form, and choices that had isolated her in ways most people could not understand. And yet, despite the loneliness, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing she had mastered her own abilities and could face danger with clarity and precision. As she sat by the window, watching the city move below, Maya reflected on the balance she maintained between her ordinary life and her secret identity. She had learned to compartmentalize, to separate the person the world saw from the operative she had trained to be. This duality was not easy, but it was necessary. It required constant awareness, careful calculation, and the ability to read people, situations, and even silence itself. Tonight's encounter had been a perfect example, a situation where perception clashed with reality, where fear met control, and where preparation met opportunity. Her mind wandered further, recalling the countless drills that had pushed her beyond her limits. Physical endurance, mental acuity, and emotional control had been drilled into her daily. She had learned to anticipate danger, read subtle cues, and respond with calm decisiveness. Each lesson had been hard-earned, but invaluable. Every encounter, every mission, every challenge had strengthened her, preparing her for moments when ordinary instincts would not be enough. And tonight had reminded her that the world outside her training could be just as unpredictable as any foreign city, just as fraught with danger and misunderstanding. Maya also thought of the personal cost of her life. Friendships had been fleeting, trust had been fragile, and relationships had often ended before they could begin. She had learned to rely on herself, to trust her instincts, and to find strength within. The badge she carried, the authority it represented, and the skills it symbolized were both a gift and a burden. They allowed her to navigate danger, but they also reminded her that her life was different, set apart from the ordinary, and often misunderstood. The night outside continued its quiet rhythm, yet Maya felt the echoes of her past and present mingling together. The encounter with the officers had been brief, but it had reminded her of the importance of awareness, composure, and clarity. It had also reminded her of the power of her secret life, the skills, the courage, and the discipline that allowed her to navigate both danger and the ordinary world with equal competence. She understood, with quiet certainty, that this balance was the essence of her existence. As she prepared for rest, Maya allowed herself a moment of reflection. The city was alive with stories, many unseen, many untold. Her own story was one of secrecy, courage, and discipline, layered beneath the ordinary routines of daily life. The encounters she faced, the challenges she navigated, and the authority she wielded in subtle, controlled ways were all part of a life few could imagine. Tonight had been a glimpse for others, a reminder for herself, and a testament to the power of preparation, courage, and composure. Maya's gaze lingered on the city skyline, lights flickering in the distance like tiny beacons of possibility and danger. She understood that life would continue to challenge her, to test her skills, and to demand her courage. Yet she also knew that she was ready, as always, to face the unknown with calm, precision, and confidence. The night had been a reminder not only of her abilities but of the extraordinary life she led beneath the surface, a life defined by courage, secrecy, and the quiet mastery of fear and control. The following morning, the city had returned to its usual rhythm, yet the events of the previous night lingered like a shadow over Maya's thoughts. From the moment she had left the street where the officers had confronted her, she had remained alert, aware that the encounter was not fully behind her. In her line of life, every revelation carried consequences, and even a brief exposure could ripple in unexpected ways. She moved carefully through her apartment, making routine checks, ensuring that nothing unusual had occurred while she rested. The ordinary world was deceptively calm, and Maya had learned to respect that calm as a precursor to action. Meanwhile, the officers were still grappling with the memory of her revelation. At the precinct, they sat in silence more than once, replaying the encounter in their minds. Their colleagues noticed their unusual quietness, the occasional exchange of confused glances, and the careful way they recounted the story. "You're telling me she just showed a CIA badge?" one officer finally asked, disbelief clear in his tone. The others nodded slowly, still uncertain how to respond. It was not something their training could prepare them for, a civilian, alone, revealing authority far beyond what they were trained to handle, and doing so with calm and composure. The officers debated whether to report the encounter formally or dismiss it as an anomaly. The decision was complicated. Standard protocol demanded action when an unknown individual revealed classified credentials, yet the obvious competence and calm of the woman had left them hesitant. Each scenario they imagined carried risk, some procedural, some personal. Maya's presence had challenged their assumptions and forced them to question not just their understanding of authority, but their understanding of control itself. Every word she had spoken, every movement she had made, lingered in their minds like a puzzle that refused to be solved easily. Back in her apartment, Maya considered the possibility that the encounter could draw attention beyond the immediate officers. Though she had revealed only a fraction of her identity, she knew that even small exposures could have consequences. She went through the mental checklist she had learned over years of training, assessing risk, evaluating potential outcomes, and preparing for contingencies. Her instincts, honed through missions in unpredictable environments, told her that the street encounter was over but not forgotten. Someone would think about it, someone might act on it, and she needed to be ready. She paused by the window, looking down at the streets below. Cars moved slowly along the avenues, pedestrians hurried past, and the city seemed ordinary, almost oblivious. Yet Maya knew differently. She understood that the ordinary could mask the extraordinary, that danger often hid in plain sight, and that perception could be manipulated by experience and skill. The officers, in their limited exposure to her, had seen only a fraction of her reality. That fraction was enough to change their perception of her, enough to leave them cautious, uncertain, and respectful. Later that day, Maya left her apartment briefly to run routine errands. She moved with a quiet awareness, scanning the streets, noting faces, listening for irregularities. Even in mundane tasks like grocery shopping or walking through a park, she observed patterns, anticipated behavior, and calculated potential threats. Her training had taught her that safety was never guaranteed, and that vigilance was a constant requirement. Every glance, every sound, every shadow carried information. She had learned to trust those details, to rely on them to guide her decisions. At the precinct, the officers struggled to explain their experience. They had followed protocol, but the encounter had unsettled them. "I don't know what to write in the report," one admitted. "It's not illegal to have a CIA badge in public, but it's unusual." And the way she handled it, calm, confident, it was like nothing I've seen before. The other nodded, rubbing his forehead. They were professionals, trained to assess and react, yet they found themselves humbled, uncertain, and questioning the limits of their authority. The encounter had left a mark, a silent acknowledgement that appearances could deceive, and that skill and experience could surpass assumptions. Maya returned home in the late afternoon, blending seamlessly with the ordinary rhythms of city life. People passed by without noticing her, cars honked, and the hum of traffic filled the streets. Yet beneath that ordinary facade, Maya carried the echoes of the previous night. She reflected on the delicate balance she maintained between her ordinary existence and the extraordinary skills she possessed. Every encounter, every moment of observation, and every act of composure was a reminder that life required vigilance, and that her dual identity demanded careful navigation. She unpacked groceries and went through her usual routines, but her mind remained alert. Each step, each sound, each moment of silence carried information. Maya's instincts had been sharpened through years of training to detect potential threats before they materialized. Even when surrounded by familiar objects and routines, she remained cautious. The encounter with the officers was over, yet the lessons lingered: the importance of awareness, the consequences of revelation, and the subtle power that came with composure and truth. As evening approached, Maya allowed herself a brief rest, sitting by the window and looking at the fading light over the city. She reflected on the officers' reactions, the impact of the badge, and the subtle power she had wielded without aggression. In their eyes, she had been more than a civilian; she had been a force of authority, calm and controlled, a reminder of the world beyond their assumptions. The city seemed quiet, but Maya knew that the night could bring new challenges, that danger often appeared when least expected, and that her skills would always be required. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the streets below. Maya's mind was alert, yet her heart was steady. She had navigated the immediate consequences of the encounter successfully, but she understood that vigilance was never optional. Her life required constant awareness, careful planning, and the ability to act decisively when necessary. The officers had left their mark on her night, but she had also left a mark on them, a silent lesson in perception, authority, and composure. As the city lights flickered on, Maya prepared for the evening, knowing that her life was layered with complexity, secrecy, and responsibility. The encounter had reminded her of the delicate balance she maintained daily, between ordinary appearances and extraordinary capability. She reflected on the power of composure, the lessons of her training, and the quiet satisfaction of handling a potentially dangerous situation with calm and precision. The night ahead, as always, demanded vigilance, but Maya was ready. She had faced fear, authority, and uncertainty, and emerged not only unharmed but empowered, her skills and instincts sharper than ever. The night fell heavy over the city, draping streets and alleys in darkness and shadows. Maya moved through her apartment with deliberate calm, yet her senses remained razor-sharp. The encounter with the officers had ended hours ago, but the consequences still lingered in her mind. She knew the world did not pause for ordinary life. The city was alive with movement, hidden threats, and possibilities she could not ignore. Even familiar streets could conceal danger, and every face could hide intentions that went unseen. Vigilance was her constant companion, a quiet rhythm that never left her. A knock at her door startled her, a sudden sound that cut through the calm of the evening. Maya's instincts kicked in instantly. She froze, listening, every nerve alert, and carefully gauged the situation. The knock came again, softer this time, hesitant. Maya's mind raced through possibilities: friend, neighbor, danger, or some coincidence. She approached the door slowly, eyes scanning for details, listening for any hint of threat. She had learned that split-second decisions could mean the difference between safety and disaster. When she opened the door just a crack, she saw no one immediately. The hallway outside was empty, quiet except for distant sounds of the city. A small envelope had been slipped under the door, almost as if it had appeared without warning. Maya bent down carefully, picking it up without touching any other part of the floor. Her heartbeat quickened, her instinct sensing that this was not ordinary mail. She held it in her hands, examining it. The envelope was plain, unmarked, and yet it radiated subtle significance, the kind that trained eyes could detect immediately. Her fingers traced the edges of the paper, careful not to tear it. Inside, she found a single note, written in simple, sharp words, "Not everyone saw last night as they should. Be careful. Watch your steps." Maya's mind went instantly to the officers, the street, the badge, and the ripple effects of her revelation. This was a warning, not a threat, but she knew better than anyone that warnings often preceded action. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. Every muscle, every thought, and every decision mattered. Maya's eyes scanned the apartment as she processed the message. She checked the doors and windows, ensuring no one had entered, and verified the usual security measures she had in place. It was a precautionary step, one she had taken countless times before, yet tonight it carried an added weight. Someone had noticed her, understood her, and taken action to remind her that the world of secrets and danger she inhabited was never far away. The city, with all its ordinary facades, had revealed once again that even the smallest actions could have consequences. She reflected on the officers' reactions from the night before. Their hesitation, confusion, and silent respect had left them vulnerable to observation by others. Maya understood that her revelation, however brief, had created ripples that extended further than she had imagined. The note under her door was proof. Someone had been watching, analyzing, and taking careful steps to communicate a warning. It was a reminder that in her world, even seemingly minor events could trigger a chain reaction, and every step required attention, calculation, and precision. Maya placed the note on her table and leaned against the counter, closing her eyes briefly. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to center her mind, and to consider her options. She knew that reacting impulsively could compromise her safety, yet doing nothing could also be dangerous. Her life demanded balance, careful decisions, and the ability to anticipate the moves of others. This was a test, one of subtle tension and hidden stakes, a reminder that her training was not just for extraordinary missions abroad, but for moments like this, right in her own city. Her mind replayed the events of the past 24 hours. The encounter with the officers, the calm revelation of her identity, the quiet power she had wielded, all of it had led to this moment. The note was not a threat in itself, but it carried the weight of potential danger. Maya's instincts were clear: someone had noticed, someone had assessed, and someone had decided to send a warning. That knowledge alone was enough to sharpen her focus, to heighten her awareness, and to remind her that ordinary life and extraordinary skill were never truly separate. Maya moved to the window and peered into the street below. The city looked calm, almost serene, but she knew better. Every shadow could conceal someone watching, every light flicker could signal movement, and every ordinary sound could hide meaning. Her life was one of constant awareness, of observation, and of measured responses. She had survived far worse than a warning note slipped under a door, yet the significance of this moment was not lost on her. It was a test of patience, intelligence, and composure, and she met it with the calm determination she had cultivated over years of training. Her phone buzzed gently, a text from an unknown number: "We know what you revealed. Be careful. Actions have consequences." Maya's pulse quickened slightly, but her expression remained calm. She analyzed every detail: the timing, the wording, the subtle threats hidden between the lines. This was not a random message, it was precise, calculated, and intended to provoke thought without immediate action. Maya understood the intent immediately. She also understood her next steps had to be deliberate, cautious, and strategic. She prepared her apartment, double-checking locks, scanning for unusual signs, and reviewing contingencies in her mind. Every precaution she took was second nature, a combination of training, experience, and instinct. She moved with quiet efficiency, aware of the tension building around her yet maintaining the calm exterior that had become her signature. The city outside continued its nightly rhythm, unaware of the silent drama unfolding within a small apartment. Maya sat by her desk, thinking about the balance she maintained between revealing enough to assert control and concealing enough to protect herself. She knew that the night's events had triggered new interest in her, unseen and potentially dangerous. But she also knew that her composure, skill, and intelligence gave her an edge over those who would challenge her. This was a world where perception, preparation, and action intersected, and Maya had learned to navigate it with precision. As midnight approached, Maya finally allowed herself a small measure of rest. The city slept, or at least appeared to, but she remained alert. Every sound, every flicker of light, every movement outside her window carried meaning. The night had reminded her of the delicate line she walked, the constant tension between ordinary life and the extraordinary skills she possessed. She was prepared for what might come next, ready to act decisively, and confident that she could navigate the challenges that awaited. The city was quiet, yet for Maya, the night was alive with tension. The warning note and text had set a new rhythm, a subtle reminder that her life was never ordinary. She moved through her apartment with calm precision, checking every entry point, scanning for anomalies, and reviewing her mental plan. Her training told her that vigilance was the key to survival, and every instinct honed over years of missions whispered that she had to remain alert, measured, and ready. Suddenly, a sound came from outside, a faint scuff, a shadow moving past her window. Maya froze, heart steady but senses alert. She moved silently to the nearest vantage point, observing the street below with sharp eyes. A figure lingered near the corner, partially obscured by darkness. The city lights flickered, and for a moment, Maya and the figure were locked in a silent standoff, each aware of the other but neither acting. The tension was palpable, thick enough to feel in her chest. She stepped back, blending into the shadows of her apartment, careful not to reveal her presence. The figure seemed to hesitate, then vanished into the night. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. Was this someone connected to the officers? A curious observer? Or a threat directly related to her hidden life? Each scenario carried its own risks, yet her composure never wavered. She had faced far worse, survived situations that would have terrified ordinary people, and yet remained calm, collected, and decisive. Tonight was no different. Maya knew that the city was full of observers, people who acted on assumptions and whispers. Her skills, her training, and her instincts were her only guarantee of safety. She moved through her apartment, preparing contingencies, checking exits, and setting traps to detect intrusion. Each step was deliberate, precise, and calculated. She understood that the night could hold surprises, that danger could appear where least expected, and that her ability to act decisively would determine the outcome. Hours passed. The figure did not return, but Maya's awareness remained sharp. She reflected on the officer's reactions, the ripple effects of her revelation, and the warning that had arrived at her door. Every encounter, every revelation, and every calculated move was part of the delicate balance she maintained between ordinary life and extraordinary skill. The badge, the calm authority, and the quiet power she wielded had left an impression on the world outside, and now she faced the consequences of being seen, even briefly, for who she truly was. She sat by the window, letting her gaze wander over the city. The lights shimmered like distant stars, the streets quiet but filled with invisible movement. Maya's mind was alert, but her heart remained steady. She had trained for situations like this, for threats that appeared without warning, for moments when perception and reality collided. Her calm, her experience, and her intelligence had brought her through countless challenges before, and she trusted that they would guide her now. Then her phone buzzed again, a message, short and cryptic: "You are seen. We are watching. Choose carefully." Maya read it carefully, noting the tone, the timing, and the subtle implications. It was a test of patience and intelligence, not a direct attack. And Maya understood exactly how to respond. She smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and determination crossing her face. She had always known that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. And tonight, as she faced the shadows that crept into her world, she felt that courage fully. She prepared a plan, not of confrontation, but of observation and awareness. Every movement would be calculated, every decision deliberate. She set measures to track any activity, monitored exits, and positioned herself to act only when necessary. Maya knew that the city was full of secrets, that danger often hid in plain sight, and that her life required constant vigilance. But she also knew that she possessed the skills, the courage, and the discipline to navigate whatever came next. Hours later, the city began to wake, the streets filling with the normal rhythms of life. Maya remained alert, yet she allowed herself a sense of quiet satisfaction. She had faced the unexpected, managed the unknown, and maintained control without panic. The night had tested her composure, challenged her awareness, and reminded her that the balance she maintained between ordinary life and extraordinary skill was delicate but powerful. Maya leaned against the window frame, watching the sunlight touch the buildings. She reflected on the journey, from the tense street encounter with the officers, to the revelation of her secret, to the warning that had arrived at her door. Each event had reinforced her understanding of vigilance, composure, and courage. And as the city moved around her, unaware of the silent drama that had unfolded, Maya knew that she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. In that quiet moment, she allowed herself a breath. The world outside remained unpredictable, shadows lingered, and unseen eyes might still watch, but Maya was prepared. She was calm, confident, and ready. Every step, every choice, and every move had been shaped by skill, training, and courage. And as she turned from the window, she carried the quiet knowledge that she had navigated the night's tension with clarity, strength, and precision. The city held secrets, danger, and uncertainty, but Maya had faced them all and emerged not only unharmed, but empowered. And somewhere deep inside, she smiled, knowing that the balance she maintained, between fear and courage, secrecy and revelation, ordinary life and extraordinary skill, was hers alone to command.